So we'll change the flavor of the conversation now. The first part till now we've been focusing more on the network side. Thought that it would be helpful to put the spotlight a bit on the customer and understand from the customer's point of view how they view service and how AI can help with that. And I actually wanted to thank Beth from British Telecom who set up the perfect setup for my presentation when she presented the data earlier, saying that 60% of the customers actually want Amazon and Netflix to get into telecom services, and they would switch over happily. And that's the topic of the conversation, that what is it that these digital natives like Amazon, Netflix, Groupon, etc. are doing so well that people want to switch to them from a customer service perspective, and how can telcos learn from that, right? So that's the topic we'll focus on. But before we do that, some data to show why that is important, right? This is a report that Customer Gauge published in 2018 on the Net Promoter Score and CX for various industries. This is an average across all the companies for various industries. As you can see that there is a lot of scope for improvement, especially for the telco players. We heard earlier in the day that a lot of steps have been taken in terms of improving customer experience, but in terms of how the customer is seeing it, there is scope for improvement. And you can also see that there is a lot of churn that the industry is undergoing. 22% annual churn rate translates to about 100 million customers switching to a different provider almost on an annual basis. That's a lot of churn to deal with, a lot of cost that the industry undergoes because of that. And we've also seen that in terms of the customer service cost itself, it hasn't really gone down dramatically over the years, right? So it's pretty flat. So NPS levels, which are fairly low, and cost, which is flat, it doesn't really present a very great story. But why is that important? A McKinsey study that came out last year showed that there is a substantial difference between companies that have low NPS versus high NPS. Right? Intuitively, we all know this, but numbers tell a very, very stark story. So if you see on the left-hand side, you'll see that the revenue growth for low NPS companies, telco companies, has been in the range of -7 to 5%. So it's been pretty flat. But high NPS companies actually have grown 10 to 35%. So there is a substantial upside for good customer experience, which is borne out in terms of the revenue numbers themselves. The right side also tells you that there is a direct correlation between the digital customer service and higher satisfaction levels or higher NPS, right? So companies which have adopted digital customer service more aggressively have got better customer satisfaction scores, which, if you correlate with the table on the left, translates to better revenue growth overall, right? So the fact that digital is important is very well established. What is it that the companies can do? What are some of the key differentials between how a typical telco operates and how a digital native operates? We'd like to focus on that a little. So there are three specific areas that we want to call out. The first one, and these are shifts in terms of how you think about these problem statements. The first one is really in terms of rethinking customer service itself. For most organizations, customer service is seen as a necessary burden. It's a cost of doing business. And the way to reduce that cost is through call deflection, through measures which can move customers away from calls. But the way a digital native looks at customer service is very different. The way they look at this problem statement is to say that if there is need for customer service, that indicates something is broken, something that causes pain to the customer, and that's why the customer is having to call us or contact us. How do we fix that at source? That's a very, very different way of thinking about customer service. The second big shift that we want to talk about is how do you align your business processes to the customer needs? Right? In most organizations, the way business processes are designed, they are designed largely based on legal, finance, or risk guidelines, right? If you worked in a telco, you would know that you would design a process which is very customer friendly to start with, but then either legal or finance or risk comes in and they start putting checks and balances, which introduces a lot of friction in the process. The way a digital native would do is to start from the voice of the customer, to understand what is it that the customer is really looking for, and then they manage risk through technology solutions, right? So it's again inverting the entire principle on its head. And finally, in terms of putting tech and AI at the heart of everything, right? It's not that AI is not being used by telcos, but the way it is currently being used is to solve narrower problems, right? And even in terms of how technology transformation is happening, especially around cloud, it's seen more as a capacity, flexible capacity planning or infrastructure aspect rather than a transformation aspect. The way digital natives solve for this is to use AI at the heart in terms of orchestrating the end-to-end customer experiences. And that's what causes a big differential in the level of personalization and how connected that personalization is across various touchpoints. It's not that when you are personalizing for customer service versus the purchase funnel versus some other touchpoints, there are different personalization models. It's all connected because the customers are talking to you through different touchpoints, and that should feed back into your personalization models. Right? So if these are the big shifts that need to be made, what is it that can get you there? So we feel that there are 5 initiatives that telcos should undertake in terms of getting on that roadmap. The first one is really around leveraging voice of customer a lot more deeply. And I'm going to talk about each of these 5 in a little more detail. So leverage the voice of customer, use NLP and AI to extract insights from the voice of the customer, and then use that to drive business priorities, right? So that's number 1. The second is to fix the issues at source. And this goes back to the point I made earlier, the way digital natives look at customer services, that if there is a need for customer service, then there is an issue. Unless we fix that at source, customers will keep on feeling that pain and they will keep on coming back with that customer service request. So fix it at source. But of course, you can't fix everything in one go. So there will be some residual customer service that is required. So when the customer service is required, what channel you service through, personalize that, because all customers are not same. Some customers want to talk on a phone, some are comfortable on a chatbot, some want to do it self-service. If you look at companies like Amazon, Uber, etc., the percentage of customer service that's delivered through self-service channel is upwards of 90%, right? That's an amazing metric. 90% of what the customers need is available to them either on the website or on the app, and they can trigger it themselves. That's the way self-service has been designed. Finally, the 4th aspect is also to continuously automate. So move your agent serve issues into machine serve and self-serve, and we'll talk about how that can also be done. And finally, also something that is underlying all these initiatives is to move towards a flexible cloud-based architecture. Because to be able to use AI at the scale that it is required to solve these problem statements, unless you move to a cloud-based architecture, it's virtually impossible to solve these problems in the legacy architecture. So in terms of the voice of customer itself, how do we solve for it? And voice of customer is not really a survey that you roll out to a customer asking a few questions, and you base your insights on that. Customers talk to you through multiple channels all the time, whether it is social media, whether it is reviews on Play Store and App Store, right? And it's funny that even a Play Store or App Store review is not necessarily talking about the quality of the app itself. They are talking about the quality of service across multiple touch points. You will see review comments about product quality, about pricing, about bill shock, which has nothing to do with the app itself, right? So they are talking about multiple things. The challenge with this data is that it has a lot of noise, right? So how do you extract insights? Because what happens is that companies become tactical about it. So it becomes more about managing that particular issue. So if someone has given a comment on the social media, it's about how do we manage the damage from that comment, rather than how do we step back and understand what's causing this issue in the first place and how do we solve it structurally. And we feel that NLP and AI can play a very important role in extracting information from these multiple sources. So the first aspect is to bring all these diverse sources together, because these are connected. Customers don't really care where they're putting the comment. They could be putting it anywhere, but these are all related comments. So you use NLP and AI to extract themes. NLP is no longer about just extracting sentiment, because sentiment can make you feel good or bad about what's happening. It does not give you actionable insights. For actionable insights, the next level of NLP and AI to extract meaningful themes, and these themes can go down to very, very specific levels. For a product, what part is not working? For delivery, what is getting delayed? For service, which aspect is causing pain? It can go down to that specific level. And it helps identify a lot of insights. There could be insights around, for example, blind spots. These are things that you don't even know that they exist, but customers are talking about it, right? So there can be a lot of blind spots that can surface because of this. It gives you a sense of prioritization. Of course, customers talk about thousands of issues, but a sense of how important that is, both from a volume aspect, how many customers are talking about it, but also from an intensity aspect. This is a bad phone versus this is an awful phone. These are two negative comments, but they have different intensity. And the intensity can give you an idea of how much pain the customer is feeling. So it helps you prioritize, and it also helps you identify emerging hotspots, right? So there could be small number of comments coming which can get missed in a normal manual process, but an automated process can help you identify these emerging hotspots, which in certain scenarios can become very big very quickly. You are running a new offer. There is some issue with the offer in terms of the actual delivery. Some customers start talking about it, but if you don't fix it in real time, that offer can certainly go out of hand, and a lot of negative sentiment can be generated because of that, right? The second aspect was around fixing root causes, right? And when we talk about fixing root causes, it is not really about fixing root causes by putting another procedure or another process in place. Most digital natives go back to the tech stack to solve their problems, right? How do we solve it in a way that the problem does not occur at all? What is the tech innovation that can happen? And the second aspect is that bring in product management thinking around it. There are trade-offs. So for example, if you are dealing with customer fraud, one extreme way of solving it is to say that, okay, I won't let any fraud happen, but that will make the process, the customer journey so full of friction that even sales will not happen. The other way of solving it is to say that, okay, what's my trade-off? At what level, at what price point do I say that, okay, I can deal with this in a product way, I will let it happen, but I will keep on managing it, I will keep on making my process or my AI more refined so that I keep on reducing that, but I don't introduce new friction for genuine customers, right? And to underpin all this, there are three aspects that need to be considered. The first one is that it requires a new data model, right? Where data from multiple functions and processes can come together. Often the challenge with finding root causes is that people have different versions of the truth because they are looking at different data. and there cannot be a convergence on the root cause. If there is no convergence on the root cause, you will not solve the right root cause. Everyone will be solving the problem in a different way. The second aspect is to have clear ownership, ideally with a product manager who can bring in multiple functions together to solve the problem, because most problems require changes either in policy, in process, in product features itself. This requires multiple functions to come together. And finally, the cross-functional collaboration. So you should have teams in place who are empowered to drive this change as well. In terms of personalizing the service channel mix itself, the way to do it is to look at the customer segments. What you see here is probably a simplified version, low, medium, high, but you should think of it more as a continuum, because these are micro segments that you will create. The base level micro segments need to be created on two axes, which is the customer lifetime value as well as the digital affinity. A very high lifetime value customer, even if there is an issue which can be served digitally or through a chatbot, why would you want to get that customer through a bad experience or risk a bad experience? And maybe the way to service that customer is through an agent, or actually a high quality agent, because you know that this is a customer that requires white glove treatment, right? The third axis that needs to be thought about is what we call the anxiety levels. Irrespective of where the customer sits on the other two parameters, if the anxiety triggers are high, they can lead to people wanting to get a particular person on the phone solving their problem immediately, right? So a high digital affinity customer, also low LTV, but high anxiety. I have just seen a bill which is 5x of what I was expecting. I don't want to go through a chatbot or through self-serve mechanisms which take like 10 different steps. I want to be able to talk to someone immediately. And to be able to do this at scale, the only way to solve it is through machine learning and AI models. This is no longer a backward-looking model, because anxiety is a real-time input, which only AI models can solve for. In terms of how do you think about moving issues from agent serve to machine serve and self serve, we have a simple but helpful model to look at your issues in terms of both the resolution complexity and the frequency. Something that occurs very frequently is high volume, resolution complexity is low, move it to self serve. As the resolution complexity increases, consider machine serve, which could be a chatbot. But if it is really a very, very complex issue which requires a lot of conversation, then focus on agent serve as the resolution, because otherwise what will happen is your resolution rate will go down, which will lead to negative NPS, right? So your resolution rate needs to be the guardrail that you have in terms of the mix that you are designing and how issues are getting moved from, let's say, one channel to another channel, right? And also in terms of how to automate, I think a lot of people have talked about it, both for chatbots as well as self-serve journeys. Always start with the customer in mind. Design the customer experience first, the user experience. Whether it is a conversational user experience or whether it is a digital journey user experience, start with that and then bring back the solution. Many issues require integration across multiple systems, because to solve a particular problem, the system might have to go into multiple systems and resolve it. That integration needs to be catered to before you get into moving any solution into a different channel. In terms of cloud, I think a lot of has been said about the cloud itself. The core advantage of cloud is that it allows you to leverage a lot of libraries that are available off the shelf. There are many companies which have solved many of these standard problems. Rather than focusing on solving those problems again, use these components and customize them for your specific needs. But the problem for most providers is that, hey, we already have a large legacy infrastructure in place. How do we transition to cloud? This is not an overnight journey, right? So how does it happen? And that's where what we recommend, what we call the two-speed strategy. Speed one, solve one use case at a time and solve it end to end, right? So start with the business problem, build out your data model, data science models, and move your data also onto the cloud and the systems that are supporting it. But the way you design your cloud architecture is to look at the bigger picture, that if in 1 year's time or 2 years' time, it's going to support the entire process, what should that architecture look like, right? So keep speed two, keep the long-term vision in mind, but speed one, solve it one use case at a time. In summary, the three shifts that we're talking about: rethink customer service, turn it on its head, move towards a zero customer service vision, that we don't want to have customer service in place. The second is to align business processes to customer needs, and the third is to put tech and AI at the heart of everything. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions? I'll kick off with one. This is an area I spend a lot of my time looking at. One of the biggest challenges we see with search providers, how do you do that integration, particularly on the social media side? I know you had that up there on your side, but I think this is one of the biggest nightmares for search providers right now is, people can go on and one negative comment obviously has a bigger impact than a positive comment. So how do you integrate all of that to make it real-time and proactive, against the Twitter? Because right now, you've got a room of, 10 people on social media trying to write back to people, and it's not very effective or quick, but they're finding it really hard to bring it into their AI systems.
Right. No, that's a great problem. See, the model that I've shown is not really solving for the transactional nature of putting out that fire. That the existing manual processes will still need to cater to. But the point is that if you do only that, then you would not have stepped back and solved the fundamental problem which caused it in the first place. Right? That's where this streaming of your social media data, streaming of your reviews data into a mechanism which allows you to extract those insights and solve those problems helps. Of course, in the meantime, you will have to continue solving for the social media issues the way you currently are. So it doesn't take away from that.
And do you think we'll ever have a truly fully automated customer experience, or do you think the human touch will always have to play a role?
I think the human touch will always be required. I think a pure automated customer service is a fantasy, right? So let's look at Uber, for example. Right? When Uber started its service, it started with a zero customer service paradigm. Right? Everything will be self-serve. You go into the app and you trigger your problem statements. But soon they found that the problem statements that they had covered was a smaller universe than what the customers were facing. Right? So then what happens? Do you leave the customers in a lurch with something that's not yet been covered? Because there is always a catch-up that you're doing. Right? While that catch-up is happening, your business model is expanding, the scenarios are also expanding. So you always will need to cover up for that. The real point is that what you should be doing is, if there is a manual intervention, you should continuously be prioritizing it and moving it towards an automated experience. So you play catch up, but you will never get to 100% automated customer service.
That happened with me in London. Somebody actually was in my Uber and Uber was telling me I was in the car. I was like, no, I'm still stood here. And they were watching because a very odd experience. But thank you very much. A round of applause. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.